Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS, and today I'm going to give you my review for the 1992 classic Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. Now, if you've been a subscriber of my channel or if you've been a viewer of my channel for a long time, I'm a huge David Lynch fan. I absolutely love his films. I love films like Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet is one of my favourite films of all time, and Twin Peaks is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. And I even did a character studies video where I just basically focus on one character who I really like, and I chose from the Twin Peaks universe Agent Dale Cooper. So I'm a huge fan of Twin Peaks. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch. I'm even a huge fan of his version of Dune. Like, there's so many great, films that he's done that so many people probably don't know he was involved in, like The Elephant Man or anything like that. And it really does give you this impression that he is a really good filmmaker and he has his own unique voice. But today I'm going to be talking about the film Fire Walk With Me, which is a film, it was released in 1992, so it was after the huge, colossal phenomenon that was Twin Peaks. It was back when it was first airing in 1990 and 1991 respectively. It was loved the first year. The first season was actually very well received and it was huge. It was everywhere. All the cast members were on, talk shows. Everyone was doing specials on it. And even Carl McLaughlin hosted SNL, an American sort of comedy variety show, that year to sort of celebrate the release of, Twin Peaks and its popularity. But then after the first season and when the second season started airing, the reviews started to plummet. The cast members, certain cast members left the show. Even its own creator, David Lynch, left the show halfway through when the big, Laura Palmer mystery was solved, and it really just kind of felt like it immediately died. It crashed and burned like crazy. So when Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me came out, and on top of that, it ended on a massive cliffhanger. Well, not only did one character very famously get an uncertain fate, but two very popular characters got a very uncertain fate. Agent Dale Cooper himself, in that very iconic scene where he bashes his head against a mirror and he looks and he's sort of seeing the reflection in the mirror Bob's face, and he turns around and there's blood dripping down. He starts going, "How's Andy? How's Andy?" And he starts laughing. It's very creepy and it's very disturbing, and it broke my heart when I first watched it that Agent Dale Cooper was replaced and he's in the Black Lodge effectively. A lot of people might think that he's possessed by Bob, but in reality that's a doppelganger. So a lot of people might not know that. So that's one cliffhanger, and then one cliffhanger is where what's her name, Audrey Horne is doing a protest, and she handcuffs herself to a vault in a bank, and she ends up getting involved in an explosion which doesn't get resolved. And Audrey Horne has a massive crush or a massive love for Agent Dale Cooper, so a lot of Twin Peaks fans, myself included, were heavily shipping them. So yeah, that was another storyline that wasn't resolved, and it was one that was sort of left up in the air. So when a Twin Peaks film came out, people were probably thinking, is David Lynch going to finally tie the knot on these little stories, these little characters? Well, to a certain degree, no. But then to a certain degree, he kind of does answer a lot of questions, because Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me takes place 7 days before the events of Laura Palmer's death, before the events of the original show. And we follow Laura Palmer as she's basically in a very difficult place. She's in school, she's working very hard. She, again, in the show, it's highlighted that she was a very good person. Everyone loved her and everyone was heartbroken. Even the principal at her school in the original series has a moment where he can't get the words out because he's so upset that one of his students, who was so universally adored, died. It's such a very tragic moment, and I really love how that seems handled, and I love how every single character reacts to it. Even characters who don't even know her that well were like, oh my god, Laura Palmer's dead, and it's such a great moment. So when you see this film, you're probably thinking to yourself, why do we need to see this? We already know that Laura Palmer had a very good legacy. Everyone loved her. Everyone, thought the world of her. Everyone kind of, has these really wonderful things to say about her, that Laura Palmer was this really amazing person who did a lot of good for everyone. Why do we need to see the 7 days before her death? And not only that, but in the show, it's also highlighted that she had a bit of a dark side. She had a bit of a darker personality side because she often got involved in drugs. She was prostituting herself as well to earn a lot of extra money. She was also a heavy drug taker, and she had her own diary, but she also had a secret diary where she was unloading all these very dark secrets into, including her prostitution, her drug addiction, and she also has a couple of pages dedicated to Bob and what Bob does to her. And I'm not going to go into detail what he actually does to her, but it's actually really quite traumatic, and if you're very easily triggered, I will not recommend watching this film because it really is quite dark. It's really quite harrowing and heartbreaking. But there's a couple of instances dedicated to Bob, you know, doing what he did to her, and it's actually really quite horrible and disturbing. But also you find out that a couple of pages were missing, and throughout the entirety of the series, throughout the murder investigation, they're trying to find those missing pages. And there's even a scene where Agent Del Cooper is reading one of the missing pages that was torn up. But what's very interesting is that all of this is set up within the first 5 minutes, and it's really well done. But it doesn't start out that way. I really do like the fact that in the first 5 minutes or the first 15 minutes of this film, we're dedicated to a completely separate storyline involving an FBI agent called Chet Desmond. And he's basically, along with someone else who's a bit of a rookie, who's a bit of a neurodivergent individual, or a bit of a quirky character played by Kiefer Sutherland, they're on a murder investigation to go to Deer Meadows, which is effectively, a lot of people call it the opposite of Twin Peaks, but Deer Meadows is kind of the opposite of Twin Peaks, because instead of having, you know, the nice sheriff's station with people like Andy and Detective or Sheriff Harry S. Truman and all his deputies and all his other, you know, co-workers and Lucy and all of that, you have these very rude, very obnoxious sheriffs and, you know, employees who say things like, whenever you ask him about, you know, something that they're trying to ask about a ring that the victim had in one sequence, they go, "We've got a phone here, it's got a little ring," and then they start laughing. So they really are, they're not taking their job seriously at all. It's like we were plucked out of David Lynch universe and plunged into Rob Zombie universe. It feels like it's very kind of, they feel like those sorts of characters, like really trailer trash type individuals, and it's really kind of horrible. But then there are some really great moments in this sequence where the waitress goes up to the detectives and she goes, "Want to hear about our specials?" Cigarette in hand, she goes, "Want to hear about our specials? We don't have any." But she says it in such a very kind of proud way, like almost like Mrs. Doyle from Father Ted, when they're talking about taking the misery out of making tea. She just goes with a very proud look on her face, "What if I like the misery?" And it's like, it's really kind of funny because it's the sort of thing that you wouldn't necessarily expect someone to be proud of, but she is. And that's a very good sequence. The entire sequence in Deer Meadows is actually really great, because not only do we get, you know, insight into another storyline, another murder, which involves a woman by the name of Teresa Banks. She was a prostitute, kind of like Laura Palmer. She dabbled in prostitution, but she also had, you know, a secret affair with one of the main characters, and she also had a ring which has sort of like a green little insignia on the top of it. And that ring, even though it might seem very kind of random at first, it does actually play a very big role throughout the course of the film, because when we get to Laura Palmer's side of the story, which happens when Chet Desmond just mysteriously disappears, we find out two things about Teresa Banks that's very important. We find out that she had a ring on her finger that becomes a very important role later on in the story, but also we find out that she was hit on the head with a blunt, obtuse object. And this is possibly foreshadowed in a very disturbing way, but if you know the TV show and if you know what David Lynch is like, it's actually kind of almost funny in the way it's introduced. During the opening credits, you see basically a static television, and as the credits are going on, you're very slowly panning out of the static TV, kind of like in Poltergeist, where you're sort of like very slowly panning out or very slowly coming out of the TV. And then when the director credit of directed by David Lynch disappears, the television gets smashed and you hear a woman scream. And it's really kind of horrible, because it's followed by a woman screaming in agony, or fear, but then you're also kind of laughing because you're finding yourself thinking, it's actually kind of funny because it's almost like David Lynch saying, this isn't going to be like the TV show, get that out of your head. And it's like David Lynch's way of saying, no, this isn't like the TV show at all. And it's very funny in a way, in that kind of way, but I also really kind of find it kind of disturbing as well, because it's a really good jump scare as well, because you don't expect it, and it really is quite terrifying. But the fact that she was murdered is a very important detail, but also she was kind of disposed of in the same way that Laura was disposed of, in the way that she was wrapped in plastic as well. So we immediately get the connection that there is something to do with Bob in this, and I really do like that, because it immediately sets up the idea that yes, there is something to do with this murder, these murders are connected. And even Teresa Banks is mentioned in the pilot episode. Agent Del Cooper mentions her by name during the big announcement that he makes to the town in Twin Peaks. So the film basically begins proper with Laura Palmer going about her daily life. She's just gone to school, she's seen going into a bathroom stall, she sniffs cocaine, she's big friends with Laura Palmer, and what I really like about this entire opening sequence is it shows how normal she is, but very slowly they start to include things like her, sniffing the coke up her nose and doing all that stuff. And it's really actually quite sad, because it goes to show that Laura Palmer is clearly struggling. She's clearly, dealing with a lot of stuff emotionally, but she's really good at hiding it. She has like that smile on her face, and she's carrying her books, and you hear like the Twin Peaks theme and everything like that, and everything feels good. But then you're almost reminded, like a smack to the face, you're reminded that yes, this is going to be very traumatic for you viewers going in, and it's actually very clever. But then she goes home, she has a little cigarette, and she's like, on her bed, and she's looking through a secret diary, but then she realises that all the pages have been torn out, and she's wondering what's going on there. And it's really quite disturbing, because not only do we see throughout the course of the story, we see cutbacks to what's going on with her and Agent Del Cooper. We see that a guy who was an agent at the FBI, played by David Bowie, who's by the name of Philip Jeffries, turn up there after supposedly being gone for 2 years. He immediately comes into the office saying that he doesn't recognise who Agent Del Cooper is, and he says, who do you think that is there, and things like that. And he really is deliberately really, 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 really on edge, and you're wondering, why the hell is he so on edge? And then he just says one of the most iconic lines of the film. He touches Albert's shoulder, and he goes, we live inside a dream, it's a dream, we live inside a dream. And it's such a great sequence, because it immediately makes you go, what the fuck does that mean? But then at the same time, it's David Lynch. But this is probably one of my biggest criticisms of the film. This scene is delivered, the way I've just described that scene is how it should have gone. But there's all these different things intercut throughout the sequence. Let's say, for example, there's a scene where you see a guy in sort of like an old plague doctor mask, and sort of like a red suit and a plague doctor mask, like laughing, and then there's like TV static overlaid over the image of both them talking, and both David Lynch, Agent Gordon Cole, talking. It's like saying, for God's sake, Jeffrey, you've been gone damn near 2 years, and you've got like, this very weird, intercutting of images, and it just feels very strange, because it's like, just keep the scene as it is, don't include all this other stuff, or show us the scene in the convenience store, above the convenience store, like with Bob and the man from the other place. Like, don't have these scenes fight out for dominance, have both the scenes out in a very convincing way, because I feel like it feels like a highlight reel of a scene rather than an actual scene, and it just feels very kind of cluttered. But other than that, the rest of the film's good. But yes, this film is actually really wonderful, because what's really great about this film, and there's a reason why I included this film on my top 10 saddest deaths in horror films, because there's something about Laura Palmer in this film that really does kind of make you feel like she's no longer a victim anymore. She's now a fully fleshed out character. She has her own life, her own dreams, her own ambitions. And throughout the course of the story, you see two very disturbing occurrences, one of which is the fact that Laura Palmer just doesn't care anymore. She's doing drugs, she's going out and selling her body, she's doing all these horrible things, but then she's also being, when she's at home, it's no better, because Leland Palmer, when they're going down to have dinner, he basically says, okay, you're going to sit down, you're going to have dinner, but none of us is going to start eating until Laura washes her hands. And it's a really horrible sequence, because it really just kind of feels like it's not really it's not really kind of set up in any way. It's kind of done in a way where she just sort of sits down and Leland just immediately starts to become, really horrible, really violent, really aggressive. And it's a really difficult scene to watch because not only is Laura Palmer, aka Cheryl Lee's face, just absolutely traumatised, like she's literally on the brink of bursting into tears, but the way Ray Wise plays it, it's really sinister, and it makes you kind of feel really uncomfortable whenever he's in the room with her, because it's like he touches her shoulder and he immediately grabs her hands, and even his wife Sarah is like saying, "Leland, what are you doing?" and things like that. Like it's a really upsetting sequence, and it really kind of makes you think, like when he like grabs her by the cheek and he goes, "Oh, what's this thing you've got here?" and he gives her like the brooch that James gave her, James Hurley. And like goes, "Oh, what's this? Is this from Bobby, or is this from someone new? Is this from your lover?" And it's like, it's really horrible because he does it in such a condescending way. And he's got her by the cheek, and it's really horrible because you're really kind of like watching it going, where is this? What the fuck is going to happen? And it's really horrible, and it's really kind of depressing and very dark, but it kind of shows you what kind of a dark place Laura Palmer is in, because what they don't tend to talk about in the film, they do allude to it in some way, but what really is quite tragic is that Laura Palmer was the victim of abuse. She was a character who was abused by her father. She was abused by Bob, hence why Bob is always up there in her room, like sort of hiding under the bed or by the bedpost, like looking through the bedpost at you as you enter the room. That idea is just so horrifying, that he's there waiting for her whenever she comes home from school. And there's even this really haunting scene where she goes to a guy who's in the TV series, and he says, "He wants to be me or he'll kill me." And she literally grabs hold of him and she goes, "Fire, walk with me." And then it just sort of cuts to her in sort of like this dark mime makeup, and she immediately gets freaked out and she starts hugging him. But she says something really quite haunting in this episode, in this particular film, because she says, "Bob has been there ever since I was 12 years old." And it just really kind of makes you go, oh my god, so this abuse has been going back years. It isn't just simply a fact of, oh, this was something that happened when she was a teenager. He's been doing this for years to her, and it really is quite horrible. And it's horrible, and it's dark, and it's depressing. But I actually do think it's a very great way of refleshing out Laura Palmer's character, that she wasn't a perfect person. She was a person who had flaws. She was a person who had insecurities. She was a person who had desires, but she had desires at the expense of her own mental collapse in a way. And I really do like that. I like the fact that Laura Palmer is very well fleshed out. There's an entire sequence in this film that's dedicated to her, basically, in a room smoking a cigarette with Donna, saying she basically asks the question, what would it be like if you were in space? And she goes, well, you'd just start falling, and as you're starting to go nearer the earth, you'd burst into fire, and the angels wouldn't help you because they've all gone away. And it's a really sad moment, because not only do you have a really intense close-up on Laura Palmer's face as she's sort of lying down taking the cigarette, but you also get this feeling that she just genuinely feels empty. And it's a really sad moment. It's one of those moments where I just find myself getting teary-eyed, because it's one of those moments where she just feels so helpless, because she's trapped in a home where she can't tell anyone what's going on with her. And even if she does, they'll probably think she's crazy and send her off to a psychiatric ward. But how do you even begin to explain as a child or as a teenager that your father's been molesting you since you were a child? That, to me, is quite a horrifying thing to have to come to terms with. And there's so many sequences that I want to go deeper into detail with, but there's so many sequences that I do want to say that if you are triggered by abuse storylines, or if you're easily triggered by traumatic storylines involving abuse or anything like that, or any kind of trauma like that, I would not recommend this film, because it is a really kind of dark and very harrowing depiction of abuse. But it's also a very beautiful film, like a lot of David Lynch films are, and it really does give you this sense of, you do find yourself kind of almost caring about Laura, that you want to reach out. There's this really wonderful line from the Red Letter Media review where Jay says, Cheryl Lee's performance is so convincing as Laura Palmer that you literally want to reach out into the screen and help her. Like, you really do want to, you really do want to help her and get her out of this horrible situation, but watching the TV series, that she doesn't make it, and it's a really kind of sad realisation when that happens, because you really do watch everything that happens in Twin Peaks with a very almost kind of sad sense of foreboding that this is going to happen, that this is meant to be. And it's really kind of sad because you really do feel like she does feel like a very fleshed out person. And she was a person that everyone loved, so that when things did happen, it did make you feel a genuine sense of sadness. And I just think it was wonderful. There was a scene in this, which I'm not going to go too into detail with, but there's a scene where Bob starts to go into Laura Palmer's room and she's asleep in her bed, and he starts to touch her and kiss her, and whilst this is happening, she's like saying the words, "Who are you? Who are you?" Like, she doesn't know that Bob's her father effectively yet, and she literally just says, "Who are you? Who are you? Tell me who you are." And she literally, blinks, and she literally starts screaming, and then you cut to what was Bob originally. It's now her father, it's now Ray Wise, and she literally screams, and it was literally like that moment where it's like, oh no, it's horrible, and it really does kind of make your blood boil, but then at the same time you do kind of feel the same sense of kind of, feeling drained afterwards. And it all kind of culminates in this very horrific sequence where she goes out with her friends to this particular railroad track, and they go out to this cabin, these two people, Jacques Rousseau and Leo from the TV series, show up at one point, and they basically engage in this three-way, or this four-way between these two characters, Laura Palmer and somebody else whose name escapes me just now, but she was in the TV series. And it all sort of culminates in the sequence where they're basically, talking, and they're having this, four-way kind of thing. And it's really kind of horrible, because when they want to have sex with these women, they basically tie their hands around their backs, and it's really kind of a terrifying sequence. But it really kind of makes you kind of almost get very uneasy, because there's a moment in the TV series where, in the iconic Red Room scene, in the talk back sequence, in the Red Room sequence, the Laura Palmer doppelganger goes, "I feel like I know her, but sometimes my arms bend back." And it's really horrific, because you're kind of looking at this and thinking, oh, that's what it was. And, well, people who probably haven't watched the TV show will probably be thinking to themselves, oh, that's what she was alluding to. But they allude to that in the TV series as well, that she did have her arms tied behind her back. And what's really horrible as well is when you see Leland come up and save her, or kind of kick the shit out of these two men who are abusing these two women. He comes in, and you think to yourself, you'd be happy if you saw your father. You'd think to yourself, oh my god, my father saved me. But the second he walks into the room, the second she hears footsteps, she starts screaming, oh my god, and she starts screaming, oh my god, and it's really horrible. And Ray Wise is so terrifying in this, because it very easy, his performance is so underrated, because even though a lot of people like to talk about Cheryl Lee in this film, and her performance is near Oscar worthy, it's amazing, but the scene where he confronts her, and she like screams, oh my god, and she starts screaming, he's like, ah, and he's like mocking her screaming. It very easily could be seen as over the top, but what's very well done is he manages to draw it back a lot. Like, he manages to say a lot with just his reactions and his expressions. And sorry if the lighting's changed. It's gone from day to night, a day to night shot. But what's very interesting is that Leland knows that he's doing terrible things. He's aware of the fact that he's doing these horrible things, but he still allows Bob to come in, and I really do like that, because in the TV show, as much as I love the TV show, they do kind of hint at the idea that Leland was unaware of being possessed the whole time, and he was just sort of being controlled. Whenever Leland Palmer was in his body controlling him, he was completely there the whole time. But what's really interesting about Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me is they give Leland a little bit more dimension, and they give him more of an idea of how long has Bob been there, and how long has he been able to do this with Leland, and how much is he aware that he's being taken over. And it really does add this element of not just body horror but spiritual horror, the idea that you're basically being taken over by this thing, this parasite. Bob isn't even human at this point, he's just literally a parasite. How long has he been manifesting himself inside this person? And they even hint that Leland might have been abused by Bob at some point as well, with the line of, there was this guy who used to flick matches at him in the TV series, like, you want to play with fire, little boy, and things like that. There's almost like a hint that there was like trauma related to both him and Bob in the past. So there's all these horrific elements that do kind of come into play, and it does make you wonder what the hell has been going on with this family and how long has this abuse lasted in this family. But the entire final act, I want to go quickly into a sequence which I haven't tackled, which is the scene, well, there's actually two scenes. There's one scene where Donna goes with Laura to the Bang Bang Bar, which is a bar that was featured in the pilot episode of Twin Peaks, where, you know, Julie Cruz sings the song Falling, which is essentially the Twin Peaks theme song, but with lyrics. And it's also the scene where the big reveal happens. So it's actually kind of interesting that this scene happens here, because Laura Palmer essentially allows Donna to come into her world, into this place called the Pink Room, which probably has one of the best pieces of music ever put to film. And it's really quite disturbing, because this entire sequence is like sensory overload. It's like you've got all these different provocative images, like a light bulb sort of flickering in and out of existence. You've got like these flashing colours. You've got like this very wonderful, like, you know, cello music playing. Really kind of manages to make you kind of want to move like in a dance, but then at the same time you're also kind of thinking to yourself, it's really kind of sinister in a way as well. That there's a certain sense of, it's almost like there's a ritual taking place. Like there's almost like this grunting and this almost like chanting sound, like this fainted sound of a chanting in that particular track as well. And I love the fact that the audio is so loud that they literally had to subtitle the actors, and you're like hearing them, you're like hearing like faded whisperings, but then you like see the subtitles. I like that, because it really does kind of feel like you're entering a different world, you're entering a different realm of existence. And it's very kind of traumatic, because Laura basically sees her friend getting, you know, assaulted by this man, and she's like looking at it in a trance, but then she like screams Donna, and she like runs over to her, and she's like covering up her chest and things like that, and she's like saying, don't ever do this again, ever. And it's like really, it's really kind of heartbreaking, because she realises that she doesn't want her friends to go down this dark path. Like, she's saying that I went down this dark path, but look what's happening to me, I'm a mess, and don't do this. And I really do like that she does have a lot of compassion, and she does have a lot of love for her friends, even though her friends can be quite selfish and quite awful as well, if you've seen the TV series. So you really do get this impression that Donna really does care about everybody, and she really does want to make sure that the town is safe, even though they're in this dark world where everyone is almost acting duplicitously, where no one ever seems to be who they appear originally. And it's really kind of sad, but I really do think this film is amazing. The death sequence is also horrendous, because not only do you have this horrible build-up where Leland is basically taking these two women to this abandoned railway car, but also he's kind of, you know, he's got a mirror lined up along the floor, he's got, you know, Laura tied up, there's like lipstick smeared all over her face, and she's literally terrified, and he literally pulls out, you know, the diary pages, and he literally looks at her and he says, I thought you always knew it was me. And I thought that was very kind of interesting, because it's like, how did she not put that together? And it's like, it's such an interesting thing, because it's like, it's almost like, you know, it's almost like when you repress something psychologically, that you're not aware of it in your conscious mind, but sometimes something like a dream or something will enact your brain and switch on that part of your brain and unlock that trauma. And it's a very good depiction of trauma, I feel like, because often a lot of people might ask, well, why didn't she figure out that it was him who took the pages? But when you're in a traumatised state and you've been repressing those memories for such a long time, you don't remember those things. You're not as attuned to things as you would be in your waking state or your conscious, you know, mental state. So it's actually a very well done depiction of trauma. It does a very good job of kind of highlighting what her life would have been like if she was in that sort of position. And I like the fact that she's almost the angels that she references in one scene in the film becomes like a motif, because when she dies, there's almost like this choir-esque music playing, And it's just so heartbreaking because Philip Gerard, who throws in the Alcave ring, the ring that Teresa Banks had on her finger before she died, he throws it into the car. Laura Palmer puts it on, she gets free of her bonds, and she puts the ring on. And throughout the film, people have been saying to her, don't take the ring, and the ring has sort of like this very ominous presence to it, almost like the Ring of Power in Lord of the Rings, where it does feel that you don't know what this ring does. And even in a dream sequence, Laura Palmer hears Agent Del Cooper say to her, don't take the ring, Laura, don't take the ring. And you're wondering, is it dangerous? But then when she puts the ring on, it almost saves her, because Bob gets angry, and Leland goes, no, don't make me do this, and he gets mad and he kills her. And it's really horrifying, because not only is it done so well, because you cut back to him basically stabbing her, but then you get like this TV static that shows the man from another place like reacting in revulsion or almost like joy at this idea, but then at the same time you're also sort of like seeing these cuts of, you know, Laura Palmer's mouth spurting blood and things like that. It's really kind of horrible to watch, but then at the same time you're not reveling in it like films like Heavy Portrait of a Serial Killer or The Devil's Rejects, where they do kind of revel in the murder and they revel in the chaos. You're almost looking at it almost in a very sad way, because you're thinking to yourself, this is a life that's just been taken away. And it's really kind of horrible, and it makes you kind of emotional. It's making me kind of emotional just thinking about it. This poor girl who went through such torment and trauma her whole life has just had her life extinguished by the one person who should have been protecting her, and that's her father. And it's just such a horrible thing. And when he like wraps her up in the plastic bag, it's just really horrible to watch, and I'm even making myself cry just thinking about it. And it's one of those things where I feel like people would think to themselves, why do we need to see this? Why do we need to see Laura Palmer's death in this film? But we need to see it because we need to see it from her perspective, and we need to see it that she was a person, and she wasn't just someone who just died. She wasn't just a name. Like a lot of people in, you know, murder mysteries, they're often just reduced to a name. She was a person, and I think that's something that's really kind of done very well in this film. And I think Cheryl Lee, it's a shame that she didn't get an Oscar nomination or even an Oscar win, because she deserved it. She really did. Like, her performance is really harrowing and really kind of, you know, really kind of traumatic, and really kind of, you really go through a whole entire, you know, circle of emotions. You know, just seeing this poor girl go from one bad state to another, and it doesn't change, it doesn't end, and it's like, it's a beautifully written film, it really is. And I love the scene where she's in the bar, and she said she is listening to a song that Julie Cruz sings, and it's a song called Questions in a World of Blue, and it's a really beautiful song. And there's a scene where she just literally is listening to this song and she's crying as she's listening to it, because she feels like the song beautifully sums up her emotions in that way. And I love all the little small sequences with all the different characters. I like the fact that before she goes into the bar, she meets the log lady and she touches her head and she goes, when this kind of fire starts, it's very difficult to put out. The tender balms of innocence burn first, and the wind rises, and then all goodness is in jeopardy. And for some reason, it's a very spiritual thing. She connects to the log lady after that. Like, she's almost like saying wordlessly, like she even touches her hand and grips it like really tightly, as if you would grip, you know, a grandparent's hand, or you'd grip, you know, a mum's hand or a father's hand after having this very big talk or this big connection thing happen. And it's actually really kind of moving, because it's almost like she's saying wordlessly, you get me, you understand what's going on here. And it's a really beautiful moment. It's a small moment, but it works, and it really does kind of make you get even more emotional with what's going to happen later on. And the fact that she was given that kind of an ending, where she just basically was treated like Teresa Banks, killed, wrapped in plastic and thrown in the river. And it's really horrible, it's really dark and really disturbing. But then another really interesting thing happens where when he returns to the lodge, Bob comes out of Leland and he basically grabs hold of Leland's stomach and takes the blood that he's taken from Laura and splashes it out onto the floor, and Philip Gerard goes, "I want my Garmonbozia." And Garmonbozia is effectively a reference to pain and sorrow, which is, of course, Laura Palmer's blood. And what Laura Palmer's blood turns into is creamed corn, and you just basically see a mouth like sipping, creamed corn off of a spoon. It's just such a horrible image to end on, but then at the same time, it's a very profound ending, because at the same time, that's one way of ending the film, and you could have ended the film right there and it would have been, this is where you choose to stop. But the film continues, and what happens is Laura Palmer is in the lodge and she's sad, she's alone, she's sad that she's dead and she's alone. But then Agent Dale Cooper comes in and he puts his hand on her shoulder and he's smiling down at her, and then she looks up at the ceiling and she sees an angel. And it's such a bizarre, it might seem very random and very strange, but it actually sums up the film beautifully, because not only does she see this angel, sorry for the sound effects in the background, I'm right next door to a car park, and the window's open because it's actually quite warm, so I'm sorry for the sound effects. But yes, this ending is very profound, because not only do the angels become a symbol in the film, but they also become a symbol of hope, that the angel is effectively waiting to take Laura home. And it's actually a very sad ending, but it's also really kind of beautiful, because it tells you everything you need to know about Laura Palmer. That even though she's dead, she knows that she's earned her death. Not earned her death, but she's earned this place where she's in now, where she feels enlightened, for lack of a better word, and she feels hopeful. And a lot of people have interpreted the ending of her basically just smiling and laughing at the angel as different things, that she's not really looking at the angel, she's looking at the TV screen. And people go really meta with it and say she's looking at the TV screen of, Twin Peaks, the TV show, and she's laughing and she's crying during the sad moments, but she's laughing also at the funny moments. There's so many different ways of interpreting that ending, but it really goes to show that this film did more than what a lot of other people realise, and it's actually a really compelling depiction of abuse and trauma, but it's also got a very compelling performance from both Cheryl Lee and Ray Wise, who are two of the best actors in this, and I really do feel like this film deserves a lot of love. And this film's legacy, when it first came out, everyone hated it, everyone absolutely hated it, everyone thought it was awful, there was a very famous report at Cannes where, when it was screened there, everyone just booed when it was over. It was one of those films that was so universally hated. But people hated it because it wasn't what they wanted. People wanted just another Twin Peaks film. But what David Lynch did was essentially do a effective portrait of abuse and trauma in a teenager. And it's a very beautifully written film, and I hope that with this review, if nothing else, people check out this film and look at this film with fresh eyes, because it's a very wonderful film, and it's a film that manages to make me cry in a lot of moments, and it's actually really kind of emotional. And I'm actually going to stop this review now before I get even more emotional, because it's a really good film and I love it. It's one of my favourites. But I found myself thinking, have you seen this film, and what did you think about it? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel the same way a lot of people did at the time, where you felt very unsatisfied? If so, why? What were you expecting when you watched this film? Were you expecting a tight little continuation? Because that's not what David Lynch is. He doesn't like to tie things up in neat little bows. He likes to keep things very abstract, like what he says, oh look, a moving painting. That's what he wants to do. He wants to create a moving painting, and sometimes paintings don't always give you clear answers. It's a single image, and what you put into the image is what you keep, effectively. What you see in the image is your interpretation. What another person might see in the image, the painting, is another thing, and that's how he sees film. You can put whatever you want onto a film. You could say it's a depiction of trauma and abuse. Other people could say a film of his might be a depiction of a man who's not ready for parenthood. All these different things you could put into a David Lynch film. There's no clean answer of what it could be. And I hope you enjoyed this review. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, and you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe for more. I hope you're having a very good day. This is Josh of WHIMS. Take care. Bye for now.